Welcome back to another episode of Aftermath, and today we have a bunch of topics. First of all, my big dumb question for Scott today is debt. How do rich people make use of it? When I'm in debt, I cry, but when Elon Musk is in debt, he's winning. I also asked Scott, how do you determine the right down payment? Whether it's for your house or for a car, what is the percentage or number that sets us up for success? And lastly, we have to talk about it. We are creatures of our surroundings. Well, Scott has some opinions about why you should maybe choose your friends a little bit more wisely. Much more right here, right now. Welcome to Aftermath. Scott, always a pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
You are the Yoda of USD.
It's true.
It's a fun vanity license plate.
Yep.
Might be a letter too long.
A little too long.
I think I'm a letter or two letters
we can
off.
go YDA.
Yeah, it always works. Let's get straight to it. I need to know how important your friends are. Your friends are a pretty big part of your surroundings.
Sure.
How important is someone's friends for their financial outcome?
Well, I think, you might say, well, my instincts would be, especially when I was younger, is that it doesn't matter. I have rich friends, I have poor friends, I like them the same. And that's probably true for most people. They don't really determine their friendships, most people don't, thankfully, on somebody's economic status. With that said, though, especially when you're younger, if you're around a group of people in your mid-20s to late 20s who are still spending a lot of time at bars, and again, I'm all for a good time, so don't misunderstand.
But this whole thing is about balance.
Yeah, and all your friend group is still kind of living the fraternity life, or they're all, maybe single. You got to know that likely without really, really strong intestinal fortitude, you're likely to fall into that same lifestyle. They say we're the average of our 5 closest people, our wives, our best friend, maybe our parents, whoever it is.
If you're 50 years old and your best friend is still driving that Salt Life truck that he had back over at Valencia Community College, we're talking about that guy right now.
Yeah, maybe he shouldn't be drinking the Budweisers every night at 5:30 with the same bartender for the last 30 years. So I think that it matters a little, and you have to have context for that. What I would say is you're going to form habits that are kind of in line with those 5 people, using my example of your 5 closest people. And if everybody's out spending and overspending and not saving and frowning, if you say to somebody, I'm going to get into shape, I'm going to start working out, I would say a high percentage of people are going, no, you're not. You're not going to do. Come on, Ross.
Yeah.
Stop being stupid. Let's go eat a taco.
And my brother's been telling me that for 15 years.
Right. So you're going to hear the cynicism, right? And the reason you're going to hear the cynicism is because they know they're not going to do it, and they don't want you leaving them behind, right? Don't you dare go get ripped, because that's going to make me look even worse as they're eating their Oreos for dinner.
Well,
so that's true with money as well. If you say to some friends, look, I really don't want to go out tonight. I think it's time. That $100 is better served in my 401k. Did you know I get a match on my 401k? If I put that $100 in my 401k, they're going to put $100 on top of it. Ross,
what are you doing, dude?
Really?
Collie Buds is
what are you
in town. We're going to go to this reggaeton concert.
Are you going to be a millionaire, Ross? Is that what you're going to be? Right? No. That's what you're going to hear from the wrong people. Now, you could still like those people. You could still think that guy that's couch surfing at 43 is a good, fun guy, but it's not the guy that you want influencing your decisions. And if you're surrounded by people who think like that, as a young person especially, it's probably going to influence you. So what you find, and I don't know if this sounds a little arrogant or a little elitist or whatever, but as I matured and as I kind of left that world behind, which I enjoyed quite a bit, and I started to become more economically successful, I started to look around. I didn't get rid of anybody, and I still love a lot of the people I spent that time with, and they've maybe moved on to their own successes or not. But what I did do was I started to gravitate towards people who were more successful than me. Like, how did you do that, Mr. Jones. Now, I'm lucky because I work in a laboratory of money, right? So my clients were my examples.
Okay.
And when I was in my 20s, I could see who did better than who. Like, well, that person does this. He's been driving the same Ford F-150 for 20 years, but he's got $700,000 in his 401k. File that away. This person drives a Porsche and they got $30,000 to their name and they're 57 years old. So I was able to take that laboratory and gravitate, not that I became best friends, although many of my clients are good friends, but that I was starting to surround myself with people who were where I wanted to be. It didn't make them good people or bad people. On average, they were good people. And it didn't mean the people that were less inclined to lean into economic success were bad people. They were really fun people, a lot of them, and they're still people I'm close to and love a great deal. But when it comes to economics, the universe I formed for myself was always moving up. I was always trying to find somebody who could teach me. And here's the funny thing, Ross, about successful, quote, not rich people.
Yeah, who is your Yoda?
I have lots of them. And I have never been shy about asking clients, friends, business people who are more successful than me, advisors that are more successful than me, in bending their ears, begging for their time, trying to get out to lunch with them. Not because I was trying to conquer the world or I wanted to be rich. And here's where I think the pavement hits what's the saying? Rubber meets the pavement. Thank you.
It almost sounds like you didn't want to be rich, but you wanted to get better.
I was curious. I was like, oh, this is neat. How does this work? And that's what I think people lack, is the curiosity. And I will say it requires effort. And going back to many of our conversations about TikTok and social media, those are get-rich-quick schemes that require no work. So something that allows you to have an outsized benefit with no work, you should be immediately skeptical of. But I will say this, and I say this all the time, is that to young people, to the Nicks and the Eds of the world, is that there are people in your sphere. Sometimes it's that one uncle. You know, you go to Thanksgiving, he rolls up in the nice car, he's 65, he's not a bragger, he just has his shit together.
Yeah.
And you can tell he lives in a good house, but not a mansion. He's comfortable. He's not worried about throwing you a $10 bill or whatever it is at your birthday. How did that guy become that guy, or that aunt become that aunt who's that person as well? Or maybe there's somewhere at your work, right? If you're working somewhere and you're like, I'm never going to get ahead, but there's a person, you'll find them, who's thoughtful. They have their head down. They seem to have their stuff figured out. They're into the 401k. Find them. Yeah. Don't go to lunch with the same knucklehead who's gambling on his phone while you're eating your cheeseburger, right? I'm not saying you can't have fun with that knucklehead. What I am saying is that's not the person you want to gravitate towards.
Root for the team, but don't make the same bet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's a difference. You could still have fun without it hurting you financially.
Yeah, don't hitch your wagon to that horse.
You know, a little side story about myself, and this is so on the money, and I can't help but agree way more than I'd even want to right now, because I have walked that talk on choosing my friends a little bit more, getting a little bit more choosy. I remember years and years ago, Scott, I landed a role here in Orlando. And one of my closest friends, who at the time we had the same job, and then he found out that I was leaving to go do this new role. And the first thing he said to me was not congrats or anything. He looked at me and said, I don't think you deserve it.
Ooh.
And I proceeded to not talk to him for 8 years.
Yeah.
Because I just thought I have no space for that voice in my life. I immediately picked up on it, because at that moment, I also had self-doubt.
Of course.
I was producing all the doubt that I was hitting the quota.
You didn't have room for his doubt.
I had no room for anybody's doubt.
Yeah.
And it dramatically changed the trajectory of deleting that voice who told me that I didn't deserve something that I got.
And that's his insecurity. I mean, you were leaving him behind. That's my point.
We've caught up and had beers ever since, and everything's a little bit different now.
Yeah.
But I just... It is so... It bums me out when he said that, because it wasn't just like, I have no room for that in my life, but it was also coming to grips with every time I was told, choose your friends wisely. And here it is happening to me in my early 20s, just showing how true that advice is. And this is also me finding out that we are speaking financially as well, that friends and your surroundings determine and dictate so much of who and what we end up being. So just choosing your friends wisely is still prudent, even as an adult trying to obtain wealth.
Well, and I think, a lot of people, money, like you're raised by, obviously you have parents, and sometimes the things they do can lend themselves to your behaviors, sometimes in the opposite direction, right? If your parents were spendthrifts, they always struggled, they lived paycheck to paycheck, they didn't have the economic success they wanted, maybe there's some bitterness there,
Yep.
and you see that, and a lot of people will go the other way. You'll find that, like the person whose parents smoked will never touch a cigarette, that kind of thing, right? So I think that we just have to evaluate these experiences and these interactions thoughtfully. Right? Again, I can still hang out with the guy who's 60 years old and wants to get drunk at the football game.
You know what's better than losing $50 on Korean baseball? Watching someone lose $50 on Korean baseball, and it's your friend.
Much better. And you'll be, again, crabs in a bucket, right? If you throw crabs in a bucket, one of them tries to climb out, the others will pull them down. And I think that that's just human nature. Some people see your success as their failure and your failure as their success. I would say that's a terrible way to go through life. That's going to be an angry person for a long time. And that doesn't mean, because I always worry when I say things like this that are economically based, that people say, well, Scott, everybody doesn't want to be rich. I get it. I'm not saying this even, you have to be rich. I'm just saying if you want stability, if you want economic stability, you don't have to be quote unquote rich. You just want some stability and some comfort and some peace of mind. And you're hanging around people who don't have that. You need to evaluate their influence. You may not even cut them out. You may just say, less of Fred for a little while, right? Till I get where I need to be. And Fred accepts that that's what I'm going to do. Because again, we all have friends, to your point, or have had friends in the past that your success or your reach towards success, economic or otherwise, is uncomfortable for them. And that's on them, not on you.
And find friends there are friends that will find comfort in your success. And those 100%. Are your friends. Moving on, I got another question for you. And I hear about this, and I apologize if we talked about this a little bit earlier in episodes past, but I always hear about wealthy people in debt. Why? Why? Let's talk debt. Why are they into debt? What's debt? Why are wealthy people in debt? That they don't pay off their home? Or how can people use debt as a propellant?
As leverage.
I've never understood that.
By definition, it's leverage. My wife and I have lived in the same home in College Park now for 33 years. We bought it. It was 900 square feet. Today, it's 1,800 square feet. So I raised two kids.
Double up.
In an 1,800 square foot cottage in College Park. And my kids went to a fancy private school here in town that will remain unnamed, although it was a wonderful experience. And the kids that went to that school were often, at least appeared to be, wealthy. And what I mean by that is their parents drove very expensive cars, and they lived in very, very big houses in very fancy gated communities.
Yeah, their master bedroom is 900 square feet.
That is correct.
Yeah.
My house would fit in their master bedroom. To that point, one time we brought a little girl home, and she must have been 6 or 7 years old. And my wife said, "Oh, we're going to do a sleepover." And the little girl came with my daughter, and my wife pulled into the driveway, and the little girl said, "Is that your house?" And my wife said, "Well, yes, it is." And the little girl paused. And she looked at the house. She looked at my wife. How do you fit in it? The 1,800 square foot house, and to her, this little girl who was about this big couldn't imagine how we all got into this tiny 1,800 square foot house.
And then you did exactly what I would have done. Told her to get out of the car.
And walk
home.
Yeah, you little brat.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
You can walk to it, right?
We didn't do that. My wife is much more diplomatic than I am. I would have thrown the kid out immediately.
Yeah, man,
walk your ass home to your fancy house down the interstate.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
I'll show you. I'll call your parents.
The hell do you think I'm, Clifford? I'm a human being. I fit in the home.
So my daughter, a few years later, I noticed she stopped having people come over. And I was like, honey, we have a nice house. It's a nice home. And I said, honey, why aren't your friends? Well, you don't ever have your friends come here. And she was kind of like sheepish about it. She's like, well, our house isn't as big or as fancy or whatever. I don't know how she phrased it, but that was the essence of it. And I knew it. I knew it before I asked. And I said, well, honey, how do you think of, she said something to the effect of, well, their parents are rich. And I said, well, honey, explain to me what you mean by rich. What is it? Well, they have a big house. I said, well, you do know that people have big homes probably have a lot of debt on that home. They have to take out a loan. Not that I'm poo-pooing house loans. It's perfectly fine. But they're leveraged. And she said, what does that mean? I mean, that the house might be worth $2 million, but they owe $1.5 million on it. And the cars they're leasing, they have to pay a leasing company $900. They might only have $5,000 in their checking account, but to you, they're rich. And I could see her processing. I could almost see the little thought bubble over her head. And she started nodding. Like, she's like, oh.
That's when you looked at her and you went, oh my God, you are my daughter.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you listened? Which
and we're talking money?
Was the only time ever to this day. But I could see her starting to process that. And I've lost sight of your original question, but
of just to talk about how debt and leverage, you kind of answered it, is that how do wealthy people deal with debt? And
but those people aren't wealthy.
Yeah.
Those people,
wealth comes in a different types of these weird mirage oases.
One of my favorite books is Stop Trying to Look Rich. And that's what those people are doing. Now, I can tell you, from backroom knowledge that a lot of those people I'm talking about were not making their private school payments on time. Right? They were rolling up in the Porsche and hauling ass before the treasurer could tell, Mr. Jones, Dr. Smith. Right? There was that. Like, I knew that firsthand. So I tried to explain to her the difference between wealth and income. As The Millionaire Next Door, if you've heard of the book, says, they call those people in Texas big hat, no cattle. Right? Guy driving around in the Cadillac with the horns on the front, he ain't got no ranch. Right? But looks the part. So I would say wealthy people who use leverage responsibly, like they may, like when I do business, if we do an acquisition in our business, we will leverage resources. We will borrow money to do that acquisition, but it's not 100%. It's not even 50%. It's we'll put some money down or borrow enough money, use our own money for part of it, and we know that the maintenance of that debt is easy for us. If the world stops spinning, we can still maintain that debt, right? So in the business world, it's much more prominent. And because Elon Musk owes billions, literally hundreds of billions of dollars to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, right?
That's insane to me.
He's the richest man on the planet. He owes hundreds of billions of dollars to organizations.
And
right?
I'm freaking out about the $20 I owe my friend Carl.
Elon's not.
No,
right?
he's not.
Right. In his mind, he's the richest man. He is wealthy, but he's also very leveraged. So when you look at debt, I don't love debt. I don't like having debt. It makes me uncomfortable. I love when I pay off an acquisition or we acquire a piece of property and I pay it off. I love that feeling. I will do it again because I'm kind of addicted to entrepreneurship, but I never allow myself to get out over my skis. And so if you're going to use leverage to buy a home, you don't want to get too far flung. What happens, you look at all these subdivisions, right, that are developed, and I can name a few of them, but I won't, where, it was a $300,000 box and somebody bought it and it was all they had. Like they put their last 10 grand down and that $2,200 mortgage payment beyond eating is about all they can do. And what happens to those homes and those developments is they start to fall into disrepair because you can't afford lawn maintenance. You go to Lowe's and buy plants, so you can't walk out of there for less than $300.
No.
And those people can't do that. They can't buy fertilizer. They can't get somebody to cut their yard. And what you see is those developments slowly sink into the ground because people have over leveraged. The premise of The Millionaire Next Door is that the person living next to you, the Scott Brown, who's lived there for 33 years, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but my net worth is probably higher than most of my neighbors. They have no idea.
And that's got to be that has to feel cooler than having the biggest house on the block.
I don't know if it's cooler, but it feels a lot. I sleep a lot better, right?
It's not even feeling cooler. It's literally objectively better.
It is objectively better.
And it's crazy to say that for the first time, because that's not what the facade is I would say in the Western world, is that you don't put your debt to income ratio on your address.
Right. People don't know.
All they see is that old orange door.
Yeah.
And then they Jones out, right? And then you're always keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, and consumerism is a thing. And again, I like stuff. Anybody who knows me, Ed and I have ridden motorcycles together for years, and I always got the fanciest motorcycle. I was the slowest rider, but I had the fanciest motorcycle. And so I like stuff just like anybody else does. I'm not poo-pooing that if you can afford it. But leveraging to look a certain way is a bad idea. You know, they say they did a study once, and I always mess this up when I try to explain it, but they say the average person would rather make $80,000 and live in a neighborhood where people make $70,000 next to them than make $100,000 and live in a neighborhood where everybody makes $110,000.
That is a very wordy Dove chocolate that you ate that day. That was a great study. Wherever you read that, was that a Snapple cap?
It was on the back of a Dixie cup.
Yeah, that was
showing my age there.
That says something a lot about people.
So they'd rather make less money and just so they're above the people they live next to. So to answer your question, leverage is not, or debt is not necessarily bad. Credit card debt is obviously a terrible idea. Overspending on a car, over borrowing on a car, terrible idea. Using responsible debt to buy a home. We just talked about 40 to 50% of the average American's net worth is tied up in their home. That's not a bad thing, right? Because it may be, again, talking about people who don't save. We make our mortgage payments for the most part. So if we're building equity in a home and we wouldn't save otherwise, what is the harm in that? So I think there is value in owning a home and leveraging to purchase a home. Just don't get carried away with it where you can't maintain the home and then the value deteriorates. And make sure you're not in a neighborhood. You know, I first thing I would do is any neighborhood I bought in, do the people take care of their homes? And that tells you they didn't over leverage. And you oftentimes see that in older neighborhoods like Colonial Town or what's another old College Park is a good one. Winter Park to a lesser degree because those homes are extremely expensive. So hopefully they have the money to maintain them. But if you go to Colonial Town is a great example, those people don't live in massive mansions, but most of the yards look pretty darn good. It tells me there's a lot of people there that are not over leveraged. They're conscientious about their spending. They're conscientious about their economics. And that's the kind of neighborhood I would look for.
Now, I'm not going to lie, it does not make any sense to me still that the richest person on the planet is also in bajillion dollars of monopoly money-esque numbers of debt.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When I have money and then I owe that amount of money, I don't have money. But he still has the title of world's richest man. Make it make sense, Scott.
Well, his wealth is tied up in stock, right? So it's tied up in Tesla stock. It's tied up in the value of Starlink and SpaceX and the Boring Company. So all those companies' stock, the capital value, theoretically, if he were to sell them, is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So the 30, 40, 50, I misspoke before and said 100, but it's 30, 40, 50 billion that he owes, right? That's negligible to the amount of work, because when he goes to borrow money from, say, Morgan Stanley, he walks in with his wheelbarrow full of Tesla stock, and they use that as collateral. So they know if something goes awry, they can sell that Tesla stock and get their money back, assuming it holds its price during any debacle.
And I'm sure, just like every other person here in this country, he pays his fair share of taxes on every single one of those dollars.
I'm glad you're sure.
We were just talking about big purchases and down payments and homes and friends, and I have to ask, what is too big of a down payment? Is there like a black and white percentage number? I've lived my entire life never spending more than half of the money I've always had. So I remember I was saving in my early 20s and I got to like $4,000, but the computer that I wanted was like $2,300. So I kept saving until I had basically $6,000 to then spend it on the $2,500 thing. And that was the biggest purchase of my life at the time. Is there a percentage like that is like a little easy follow thing? I know we never speak in absolutes.
Nope.
But is there such a thing as too big of a down payment, too little of a down payment?
I think there's too little. You know, if you go to buy a $500,000 house and through some nonsensical loan situation you're able to put $5,000 down, I think that's a terrible idea. Because let's think about it. If you only have $5,000 to put down on a $500,000 house, I think it's safe to say you shouldn't buy a $500,000.
Yeah, I would also step in as this scarecrow of a person looking in, and I would be like, don't do it.
You know, in 07, they did that all day long for people, right? That's why we ended up where we ended up in terms of the Great Recession. So I think that there isn't too much. I mean, the only way it could be too much is, let's say you bought the same $500,000 house and you had $200,000 in your checking account, and that's all you had, and you put it all down. Then you're getting yourself in the same position by buying too many stocks.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So leave $50,000 in my example behind. So when inevitably your $500,000 house has an AC go out or a leak in the roof or whatever it is, you can still pay for it. Because if you're overzealous, no different than being overzealous in your 401k, everything you save goes in the 401k, you're putting yourself in a bad position. You were well intended. In both cases, you were well intended. But I would say, to me, financial wherewithal comes from leaving yourself options. If you have no options because you put all your money in the 401k, or you saved nothing, or you put too much down on a house, or you spent your last dime on a house, you're running out of options. You literally have no options. Either everything works out perfectly in the house and nothing ever breaks, because nothing ever breaks in a house, or you kind of split the difference and say, I'm going to put enough down to make the payment reasonable, but leave enough in savings that if something goes wrong, P.S. it will. That I think is the best strategy.
I asked you once episodes ago and said, how do we make money more fun? I genuinely think that's the closest answer I've heard, is having options.
Yes.
Because it's not fun when you don't have options. And that's the place that I believe me, Aftermath, this entire project is trying to keep our listeners from avoiding. You should always have those options, and you should fight for those options. If you don't have those options, and you're listening to this, keep listening, because we are fighting to have those options. You shouldn't. We don't want you don't want to be in a corner not being able to do the thing that you want to.
Yeah, and if you're desperate, which you would be in some of those situations if something happened, you're never going to make a good decision when you're desperate or you're panicked or you're anxious. So you want to avoid putting yourself in a position where you have to make a quick decision and the choices you have are limited because you have no money to make them with. So I think, again, I mean, I can give you a classic example. It
Please.
just popped into my brain. I know a guy through a friend of a friend that has made a ton of money in Bitcoin. And he got in early. Somebody said, hey, try this thing out. He did, it worked, and then he did some more and it really worked. He was just one of the 10 or 15% of people who've made money in Bitcoin. And he made a lot of money. Like, this is a person of okay means, but now they have a lot of money in Bitcoin. Here's the problem. He's terrified to sell it, and he's terrified not to sell it, because all of his assets are tied up in one thing that nobody really understands or how or why it works. I'm not saying it's not legit. Don't send me a nasty email. What I'm saying is he has no options. He either cuts bait or he sees it. And the reality is, as I said, that he does have options. He could sell some of it.
Yeah, and then
but he won't.
Yeah, because all of
he's
the eggs are in the
terrified to
basket.
make the absolute. We get back to absolutes. What if he put $2 million of the $5 million he's made in a savings account or a mutual fund or something? He's still got $3 million, but in his mind, it's binary. I have this thing, and it's done really well. Therefore, I think it will continue to do well. But what if it doesn't do well? And he's stuck hopscotching between those two concepts. In the meantime, is losing his mind over it. There's no comfort. Every morning when he gets up, he's nervous.
And you know who that sounds like? A broke person
Yeah.
Losing
Right.
your mind over it.
He got nothing out
waking
of
up,
it.
losing sleep.
He's got $5 million and he's gained no peace of mind. In fact, he's got negative peace of mind.
Isn't that ironic that that person is also going through the same similar emotions as someone who doesn't have a lot of commas in Bitcoin and a lot of Bitcoin or any type of wealth? That's wild.
Think about NVIDIA. I mean, NVIDIA is the glamour stock now. It's years ago, it was Apple, and before that, it was Microsoft, and before that, it was something else. But NVIDIA, a lot of people have a lot of money wrapped up in NVIDIA right now, right? And they don't, like the people I talk to that own it, who own, although I do know a few thoughtful people who have taken their profits and left the corpus in place. Most people are in that binary conversation with themselves. Is this good? Is this bad? Is it going to keep going? It went up 100% last year. Maybe it'll go up 100% next year. But then again, back in 22, it lost 55%. Do I want to deal with that? I don't know what to do. And they just keep having this conversation. They've made all this money. They've done very well. They've kind of got lucky, to be honest.
But the harder you work, the luckier you get.
True.
So there's a luck element, but also you gotta, scared money doesn't make money.
Yeah, and they should. Sometimes you should accept sometimes you should take yes for an answer, right? If you put $100,000 into NVIDIA, now it's worth $1 million. We'll carve 200 off. You've doubled your money if the whole thing goes in the toilet tomorrow. And if it keeps going, you got 800 that'll turn into 2 million. So that's the problem we have with a lot of people, is this binary thinking. I mean, the whole country suffers from it politically, clearly, right? It's either good or bad, red or blue or whatever. It's like college football, Seminoles or Gators. Like, I don't know how we got there. But the reality is things are not good or bad. That's good that you made a lot of money, and it would be awesome if you took some profits. And if you still believe in the company, not the stock, which is different, let the rest of it ride. No matter what happens, you won. Take the victory.
We were just talking about how big or small your down payment for any big purchase can be. But my question, Scott, is there ever a time to rent? Or is there always a time to buy?
Well, I mean, obviously it's difficult to buy if you don't have the down payment money.
That's true.
It's also difficult, if you're in college, you don't know where you're going to end up, right? So obviously buying then might be difficult. If you're in college, say the average person is in college for 4 years, they're not on a 6-year plan like I was, that renting is hard, or buying is hard, because you have to get in and out of the house pretty quickly. So I would say there are plenty of cases to be made for renting. I know the generation, like my son's 31, he came up through the Great Recession. Most of you kind of came of age, sometimes watched their parents lose homes, watch them struggle and fret and be beside themselves, maybe overextended in a home because houses only go up and they only go up a lot, was the thinking for a minute.
I mean, it must have been pretty easy to smile if you were only renting in 2008.
Probably, yeah. Assuming you kept your job.
Yeah.
So I would say that there are plenty of cases to be made for renting, especially if you're transitional. Good. Yeah.
Because I'm coming in hot. There's a lot of judgment towards renters. Now, we can also agree we'll talk about how houses can be as a real estate investment. But for the most part, like the judgment and disdain that is given to people who don't own a home, no matter how old they are. Yeah. Sure, you get some grace when you're in your early 20s.
Sure.
But once you're in your mid 30s and people find out that you rent, and hearing you say, like, no, there are scenarios where that can help you out in the long run, because this isn't a year thing. We're talking 10 years minimum when it comes to financial trajectories. Would the rule of thumb be, though, rent, but you have to save? That's always the clause for all of these conversations.
Right, because if you're not building equity in a home and you have the means to do that, but you don't, then you should certainly be building equity somewhere else, meaning in stocks, in bonds, in mutual funds, in a money market, in a savings account. I don't really care where it is, but you can't rent. Let's say you're a person of reasonable means. You and your spouse are making $120,000 a year. You're in your 3rd or 4th year of working. You're engineers or you're whatever, and you're renting because it's cheaper. You don't have the overhead. You don't have the maintenance. You don't have to get the lawn cut. That's all fine. But if you're also spending every dime you make, that's probably not okay either.
No.
So again, we're having one of these binary moments. People are so binary about good, bad, wrong, right. Don't be binary about it. And again, there are certainly circumstances where running makes sense. But I would say is that the average American, which we discussed in the last episode, I think the average American, 40 to 50% of their net worth is wrapped up in their primary residence.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing.
Or I go again, doing the binary thing.
Yeah.
But, shame on
it's
me.
habitual for us. We do it because that's the world we live in. Social media tells you things are good or bad, and there's no in between. There's no nuance. Again, not to be political, but our politicians live in that world. This guy's good, this gal's bad, right? There's no nuance. There's just good or bad.
Yeah.
We've been taught that. So I think the reality is buying a home on average, maybe 51, 52, 53% is probably the way to go. And the reason I say that is it's a good way to build net worth. This happens. This used to be the game in the Northeast, right? The game in the Northeast used to be, doesn't work anymore, used to be
lacrosse.
That still is a game in the Northeast. The game in there.
They love it up there.
They do love their lacrosse. But the game used to be, I'm going to buy a house in New Jersey, and I'm going to work till I'm 65. I'm going to sell that home for $600,000. Back in the day, it was probably $300,000. And I'm going to move to Florida, and I'm going to buy a house in Davenport for $100,000 and bank the 200 differential. So in that example of people probably, I'd say from 1970 to 1995 or 2000 or so, that dynamic worked wonderfully. That's why we have so many people from the Northeast here that are older, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, whatever it is, because that dynamic was in effect. So you can't tell those people buying those homes was a bad idea, right? It worked for them. That isn't true anymore because you're going to sell your house in New Jersey for $600 and come to Florida and have to buy another one for $600. So there's no delta there for you to take advantage of. But what I would say,
sorry, Davenport.
Yeah, our bad. But the other part of it is that if you say, well, I'm going to buy this big house to raise my kids in, I did not subscribe to that model. Some people do, and I'm not poo-pooing it, is that if you bought the $600, $800 million home and you said, well, when the kids go off and fly the coop, I'm going to downsize and I'm going to sell my $1 million home and buy a $500,000 home. And that's a way that I'm going to accumulate wealth. Now you're banking on a lot of good things happening there that may or may not happen.
Probably won't on my end. I just feel it.
But it's not awful. It's not an awful strategy. A lot of people do that. I also find a lot of people struggle to downsize because they've been living in the fancy house for a long time.
I have to ask, it's just like, you not only have a black belt in financial advising, but more importantly, you ooze not keeping up with the Joneses. And you see it, the neighbors competing with other neighbors. This is not a financial advice question. This is not a question that I have on my computer. How do you defeat that? You're a human, just like everybody else who's listening to this. And it seems like everybody falls in that trap. Have you defeated that trap? Do you have any insight on what it is to not compete to the neighbor next to you, or not get upset like the average dad would if their daughter's friend walked up and said, you guys live in this?
Yeah.
What's the mentality that you have that just pushes that to the side?
Well, to quote the great Charlie Sheen, I'm winning. Because I know I'm winning, right? Deep down inside, I know I've won, right? So the fact that I don't subscribe to that, or I won't say I don't care about it. I'm not immune to peer pressure.
Yeah.
Right. I like cool stuff. If my buddy rolls up in a Corvette, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But that's about all I do, right? I'm like, I don't know that I want a Corvette, but so I'm not immune to it. I drive a nice car. I waited till I was 55 to buy the car of my dreams, right? And the reason I could do that is because I won. And the reason I won is because I didn't do those things. So I knew deep down inside my game plan was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, right? I don't need to throw the ball downfield all day. I give it to the fullback and he plows straight ahead.
Yeah.
I don't need it to be fancy. I don't need to put up 700 yards of offense to win the game.
Do you think that's one of the, on the outside looking in, do you think that's one of the biggest obstacles for people?
Yes.
Is that,
100%.
And yeah.
It's the primary obstacle.
That's why I asked you that personal of a question, because I feel it.
Yeah.
And I have to slap my hand every now and then and go, why am I doing this? And self-reflect. And the next thing I know, I self-reflect for a day or two and I don't want it anymore. And I'm so grateful for those 48 hours that prevented me from keeping up with the Joneses. I love that term. And it's only as I get in my mid-30s have I really felt you don't keep up with the Joneses in your early 20s.
Because you'll be stuck with the outcomes that the Joneses have in their 50s. Right? Mm-hmm. So the funny part is you are keeping up with the Joneses. They just don't know it. You're ahead of them. They just think you're back there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's your advantage.
They're reading up with the Joneses.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not losing to the Joneses, because that crap that the Joneses were buying is going to be useless. I give the same stupid example every time. When I was 21 or something, I bought a car I could not afford. There's no other way to put it.
A lot of beans.
Right.
Eating
I was so proud of that car. And I when you get a new car as a young man, you kind of park it in the back of the parking lot. You don't want anybody to go near it. And then when you walk away from it, you look at it.
Yeah.
You look at it again. Look who sees me getting out of this car.
You just lock it and unlock it from 35 feet away.
Oh, yeah. Oh, did you see my car? I don't know if you saw my car. And I did that for about 2 weeks. And then about week 3, when the payments started showing up and they were bundled up, scrunched up French fries in the back and crap, my stinky shoes and my basketball and all this crap, it had worn off in 2 or 3 weeks. And then when the payment came, it really hit home. It was like, oh, what have I done? This has been a huge mistake. Now, I'm not advocating for deprivation. I'm not saying eat macaroni and cheese and turn off your cable.
No.
I'm not saying that. That is not the point at all. The point is that you need to understand your own motivations for the things you're doing. And if your motivations are inappropriate for your long-term success as you've defined it. Now, if your defined success is I'm going to buy as much shit as I can and I don't care if it falls apart, and when my check comes next week, I'm going to buy some more shit. Okay, I can't tell you that's not success.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do.
If you define that as success, that's not for me to say. But if you're asking me if that's how you accumulate wealth, I will tell you that is not the way to accumulate wealth.
And our last question, we've been talking about renting, owning, home owning, not home owning, how big of a down payment, how little of a down payment, but let me just wrap it up in one umbrella. What are your feelings about real estate as an investment?
I love it.
Just case closed, loved it?
Well, no, again, not binary.
Not binary?
Yeah. So it's funny, my son, who many people are viewing this know is also in the business, he was doing a podcast earlier, and we as a group, Nick and Ed and I, were talking about real estate. And the thing you'll see with a financial, this is a warning sign with a financial advisor. If you walk in and they find out you have 3 rental properties and they're worth $800,000, and the first thing out of their mouth is, well, you got to get rid of those, right? First of all, why? Mm-hmm. But what you really need to understand is the reason they're telling you that is they can't get paid on your rental property. So if you liquefy that $200,000 piece of property and give it to them, now they can get paid.
Yeah.
So you have to understand motivations. And I personally, I'm stealing my son's thunder here, but I personally love to see rental real estate on a balance sheet when somebody comes to see me. So I might have a person come in and they've got $500 in their 401k and they've got $150 in some CDs and they've got an annuity over there, which isn't necessarily good or bad, but they have one. And then they've got 2 rental properties and they say, I need $7,000 a month in retirement. And I go, oh, okay, well, Social Security is $1,100 and your rental, your annuity is going to throw off $500. So now we're at $1,600. Oh, you got 2 rental properties to throw off a couple. Now we're at $4,600. We're at $4,600 in guaranteed income because of those 2 rental properties. Makes my job a lot easier. On the $500, I got to manage to throw off the additional whatever my math was, $2,400, right? I'd love to see that. Am I going to get paid on the real estate? No. And that's okay, right? Because if I use that asset to help them fund their income, and I don't tell them to do something stupid like selling it when they've been dealing with it for 20, they know they got to fix the toilet.
Yeah.
They know they got to get the yard. I'm not telling, these aren't revelations. I'm not telling them something they don't know. And it's worked for them. So I'm not going to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Except the toilet. If
Except
it's broke,
do fix the toilet.
You got to fix the toilet.
Yeah,
we just established that.
Kind
Keep
of critical.
Keep up.
Yes,
Come on.
I stand corrected. Aside from the toilet, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what I would say is no. I love real estate. I own both of the buildings my businesses are in for that reason, right? I have to go there every day. Somebody, I got to pay rent to somebody. It might as well be me.
Curious, I have a friend who only has one thing of real estate. I think it's a condo. It's nothing big, nothing too small, but I asked him, we got into it. He's a close friend. I go, what's the passive income about it? And he kind of laughed at me. He goes, dude, I don't have it for passive income. And I've heard this so many times about get another property rented out, passive income, rinse and repeat. That's definitely a formula.
It is.
But what he told me kind of opened up my eyes to a different way of looking at it, maybe a little less binary. He said, I just keep it as an asset. It's going to obtain wealth. I'm not here for passive income. The passive income kind of is a wash. I got to fix the toilet. The washer and dryer goes out. All of what I make in a year or two kind of goes right back into the apartment.
Which makes sense.
But what he told me was that the value, I'm only thinking about it as an asset, not solely a monthly $300 paycheck.
Well, because he's probably has a mortgage, right?
Yep.
So if somebody's renting it for $2,000 a month and it's costing him $2,000 a month to maintain, the mortgage is $1,200 and it's $800 to mow the lawn or whatever the heck he has to do. He's okay with. I mean, I think that's wonderful. I think his mindset is perfect for that, because if it's worth $200 today, in 30 years it might be worth $600, right?
Yeah.
Even if it earns 6 or 7%, it's going to be worth $600, and the renters are paying for the asset. Yeah, he has to fix a toilet every once in a while, but he knows that. It's not like it's a secret.
Yeah.
Right? So if he gets to the end of 30 years and his renters have paid his mortgage for him and he cashes a check for $600,000, or then takes what's probably a $5,000 a month income because now there's no more mortgage, either way he wins.
And I only bring it up, and I'll double down on it, is that I know I'm not crazy. Everybody, it got trendy for a couple of years there. Passive income. The old age-old internet question of $500,000 or dinner with Jay-Z. Passive income, like all these different things.
Right.
Do you want passive income? And to hear my friend who is doing it, who's in a position to talk about, I have passive income.
He's in the game.
And it doesn't even break into his priorities. And I think it's worth for everybody who's interested in investments and in great financial choices that he's probably my closest friend that's doing the best financially. And here he is scoffing at the term passive income. And I thought that was kind of mind-boggling.
And that's why he's going to win.
Yeah.
He's going to win in the end, right? And I think, so I don't remember, somebody recently kind of made fun of the term passive income. There's no such thing, and I agree with that. All income is earned, right? Maybe not for tax purposes, but that income he's going to get 30 years from now was not passive. He's fixing a toilet. He's dealing with the bank. He's filing his taxes. He's getting the roof fixed. He's fixing the stove. The water heater went out. That's not passive, right? He's not like, here's the key, send me my money. That's not a thing. So again, if we learn anything from after the math, what we should learn is that anything that looks like a shortcut, anything that claims to be passive, anything that seems to be easy is anything but. The harder it is, the more resistance you face, the more patient you have to be, the more work you have to put into something, the higher the reward will be.
The harder you work, right? The luckier you get.
I mean, it's that simple. I mean, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
Scott, do you think we're getting